I'm Asit Sharma, Senior Analyst at the Motley Fool, joined by Senior Analyst Karl Thiel, and our guest today is Dr. Alan Baratz, CEO of D-Wave Quantum, symbol QBTS. Dr. Baratz has had a distinguished career in the tech industry, including a stint as the first president of JavaSoft at Sun Microsystems. He holds a doctorate in computer science from MIT, and he's leading D-Wave Quantum in the race to develop fault-tolerant quantum computers. Dr. Baratz, welcome to the Motley Fool.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for taking the time to chat.
Well, we're so excited about this time we have with you. We're going to ask you a range of questions about D-Wave and the industry, and I'll hand it over to Karl to get us started.
Yeah, so D-Wave, I think made its name in what's called quantum annealing, which is an approach to quantum computing that differs significantly from the gate model approach that's being pursued by most other companies in the field. So when you think about IBM, Rigetti, IonQ, Google, what they're doing, your strategy has shifted a little recently. But first, could you maybe just explain a little bit about what the difference is between quantum annealing and these the gate model approach?
Yep. So annealing quantum computing and gate model quantum computing are two very different approaches to quantum computing that are also quite complementary in the sense that they are each good at solving different classes of problems. Annealing quantum computers are excellent at solving business optimization problems. So these would be things like workforce automation or manufacturing plant floor optimization. They're not very good at solving differential equations. That's the domain of gate model quantum computers. They're very good at solving differential equations for applications like quantum chemistry or materials design, but they're not very good at solving optimization problems. And so both of these approaches to quantum computing are actually required to address the full set of quantum use cases. And right now, D-Wave is the only company in the world pursuing both approaches to quantum computing to be able to address the full set of quantum use cases.
And, just following up on that a little bit, what are some of the advantages beyond, just the use cases that go along with an annealing approach? Is it, my understanding is that it's maybe more fault tolerant. Is that true, or are there other things?
Yeah, so we started with annealing quantum because it's a much easier technology to work with. It's much easier to scale. That's why our annealing quantum computers are now at over 4,500 qubits, whereas the largest gate model systems are maybe 100 qubits. And they are much less sensitive to noise and errors. In fact, they can deliver good, if not optimal solutions without the need for error correction. That's not true with gate model quantum computers. There's no evidence at all that a gate model system will be able to solve any useful problem without error correction. And so gate model systems require error correction, annealing systems do not.
So am I overstating it if I say that annealing systems are sort of able to solve real world problems today, and gate model is a little bit more in the proof of concept category? Is that going too far?
No, I think that's an accurate characterization. In fact, our quantum computers are solving real world problems today. We have customers, in fact, that are using us today as part of their business operations, and our annealing quantum computers are the only quantum computers that have actually been able to solve a useful problem that cannot be solved classically, what we call true quantum supremacy. This was a problem in the area of computing properties of materials that we were able to solve in about 20 minutes, and it would take nearly 1 million years on the fastest supercomputers. So annealing quantum computers are commercial today. Our annealing systems are commercial. They are solving practical problems. They are being used by customers as a part of their business operations. Gate model systems are still years away from achieving that goal. The work going on with gate model systems today is all in the area of research experimentation, trying to solve small problems or toy problems on the gate model system to prove the eventual viability of those systems. But we're still several years away from commercially viable gate model systems as we continue to work on the error correction that's required in those systems.
Great. And I think we'll probably want to come back to some of your achievements later on. But first, I should mention that you have shifted over to being maybe more of a dual model company with the acquisition of Quantum Circuits, which is a gate model approach. And so I think Asit had a few questions that he wanted to kind of dive into on that end of things.
Sure.
Yeah, let's dive in. So the first thing that really interested me is that you acquired some technology with the Quantum Circuits acquisition that may help in this pursuit of fault-tolerant quantum computing. And I wanted you to break down some esoteric concepts to us and our members. The first is this potential advantage in the realm of error correction. Can you explain what quantum error erasure detection is, and why is this important as we think about the way gate model computers solve problems in the real world?
Sure. So let's start with what is error correction. Okay. So one of the things that we all take for granted today is that our classical computers, the things that sit on our desktop, the things we hold in our hand, they all have error correction built into them. We don't think about it, but they're susceptible to errors also. A bit might flip, generating an incorrect answer. And that does happen in these classical computers. It's just that we have error correction, error correcting codes that catch that and correct it. Now, the good news about classical computers is there aren't too many sources of errors, and they don't happen very often. And so the error correction is very simple and very efficient. However, quantum computers, gate model quantum computers, have many more sources of errors, many different types of errors, and they occur very frequently. In fact, after about 10 or 20 computations, the errors have built up to the point where your computation is essentially corrupted. So that's why we say without error correction, it's unlikely that a gate model system will ever be able to do anything useful, because you need thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of computations to solve a problem. And yet today, 10 or 20 computations and the computation is destroyed because of errors. Okay, so we need error correction within the gate model quantum computers. Okay, well, the codes for correcting these errors are fairly complex because they have to deal with, as I said, many different types of errors. But there's one error that is most prevalent. It's called an erasure error. An erasure error is where essentially the information in the qubit just disappears. Okay, and that is in fact the most prevalent error in gate model systems. About 90% of the errors that occur are those erasure errors. The information just poof, disappears. Okay, well, if you had a really efficient mechanism for detecting the disappearance of the information, that would make it much simpler to do the error correction, because you'd only have to worry about the 10% less common errors that occur. And that's exactly what the technology that we acquired when we acquired Quantum Circuits is all about. The qubits that Quantum Circuits has developed, actually, this was technology developed at Yale University and then moved into Quantum Circuits as Quantum Circuits was spun out of Yale. This technology is what's called a dual rail qubit. Okay, so you can think of it as each qubit having two wells. One well is for 0, the other well is for 1, with a connector in between. And then there's a photon. If the photon is in the 0 well, it's 0. If the photon is in the 1 well, it's 1. If the photon is in the connector between the two, it's superposition. Okay? So what's so cool about the dual rail qubits is that if the photon disappears, the qubit itself detects that and raises its hand and says, I've had an error. I've just had an erasure error. Okay, so that's a very easy way of correcting 90% of the errors. Raise your hand. I've lost the photon. Now the system can ignore that computation, that data point, and move on. Okay. Well, what's so interesting about this is that this means that dual rail qubits can error correct with far fewer physical qubits per logical qubit. So let's spend a minute on this. There are two main technological approaches to building gate model systems. One is called superconducting, and the other is a variety of different approaches that are not superconducting, like photonics or neutral atom or spin qubits or trapped ions.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So here's what's been known up until now. It takes a lot more physical qubits to error correct a superconducting logical qubit. It can take up to 1,000 physical qubits to get one error-corrected logical qubit with superconducting. It's much more efficient to do it with the other approaches, trapped ion, photonic, neutral atoms, maybe 100 physical qubits per logical qubit. Maybe we can get it down to 25 physical qubits per logical qubit. But the bottom line is it's much easier to error correct trapped ion, neutral atom, photonic because the qubits are higher fidelity. The qubits themselves are more reliable. They have lower error rates. Whereas with superconducting, it's much harder to error correct. 1,000 physical qubits per logical qubit. So then you might say, well, why would I ever use superconducting? I'll just go with one of these other approaches. The answer is superconducting is a lot faster. Superconducting computation is 1,000 times faster than the compute in the other modalities. So that's why you want supercomputing, because who wants a quantum computer that's 1,000 times slower, right? You wouldn't want that. So you want superconducting, but they're a lot harder to error correct. Okay, here's the cool thing about the dual rail qubits that D-Wave acquired from quantum circuits. They are superconducting qubits. So they run 1,000 times faster than the other modalities. But because the dual rail qubit itself can detect 90% of the errors, they have the same fidelity, the same quality as the trapped ion or the neutral atom or the photonic qubit, which means you can error correct them with 100 physical qubits per logical qubit or less. So now we have qubits that are the best of both worlds. They have the speed of superconducting because they are superconducting, and they have the quality of trapped ion, which means they can be error corrected easily and efficiently. The best of both worlds. And that's very revolutionary and very important. And that, in some sense, has just catapulted D-Wave to the forefront in gate model quantum computing.
Okay, so a super quick follow-up, and then we're going to stay on this topic and extend this to some design choices that you all have made. The super quick follow-up is for the laypersons out there, like myself, who are learning about this technology. When you have this dual rail system, does the information raise its hand while in superposition, or you're saying after the waveform collapses, it raises its hand and says, okay, ignore me, I'm in error?
Yeah. So the answer to that question is currently we get the information after the computation is complete. However, We have in development right now the ability to get and use that information in the middle of a computation. So ultimately, in the quantum state, in the middle of a computation.
Okay, so let's continue this. It's extremely interesting. So faster computation, higher fidelity, and your competitors who are using superconducting approaches have settled on a substrate. I call it a substrate, but basically this is a transmon conductor. And you all have chosen something that is a little, I think, harder to maybe manipulate. It's a Fluxonium conductor, superconductor. So we were curious about this. We understand that you already use this in your annealing computers, but what are the design advantages to taking an approach that I think from your own admission may take longer than working with transmon conductors the way that IBM or Google are pursuing now? What are the advantages to this design choice?
So first of all, I need to provide a little bit of context. D-Wave began working on a gate model quantum computer several years ago, right? We acquired quantum circuits only in January of this year, but we began working on a gate model quantum computer several years ago. And the path that we were pursuing was Fluxonium-based qubits, because our annealing quantum computers are flux-based qubits. We knew them, we understood them, and we believed they had some advantages in the gate model space. Some of these advantages included, for example, the fact that you could control them with lower speed lines. You didn't need microwave lines. So the control was much easier and much less expensive. Right? And there were other advantages that they had over transmon qubits as well. But there were a set of advantages that led us to start down the path of flux-based gate model qubits. Quantum circuits uses 2 transmon qubits as part of their dual rail system. Okay, so each dual rail qubit has 2 transmons, not Fluxonium. So our initial gate model systems, the 8-qubit dual rail system that is operational today, the 17-qubit dual rail system that will be operational later this year, then we're going to 49, then 181, then on to 1,000. But up through the 181 qubit system, they will use the transmons that were in the dual rail qubits as QCI developed them. What we are working on now is an investigation into whether replacing the transmons in the dual rails with Fluxonium would make the control simpler. If so, as we move from 181 to 1,000, we would transition from the transmon to the Fluxonium. If not, we'll just stay with the transmon going forward. So that's work that we will be doing over the course of the next 2 years, which is the timeline to get to the 181 dual rail qubit system.
Great. I wanted to talk about what you see as some of the advantages of being a dual model company. I mean, you kind of referred to it earlier that there are different problems that different technologies do better or worse. One area I wanted to touch on is defense. It would strike me, at least from a 30,000-foot view, that a lot of defense problems would be in the sort of optimization category. But, the Defense Department, or at least DARPA, has kind of seemed to very much favor gate model in its contracts, or at least in the quantum benchmarking initiative. And so, I wanted to, I guess I wanted to know, did that enter at all into your kind of push into becoming dual model? And obviously you have gotten some defense contracts. I mean, you're working with Davidson Technologies, you're working with Anduril. This is not the Defense Department directly, but these are contractors. So I just wonder how you see this particular area evolving if the Defense Department is kind of changing its approach.
Yeah. So first of all, the DARPA QBI program, the Quantum Benchmarking Initiative, is an R&D initiative. It's not an application initiative. Right now, it's all about funding R&D to address error correction and scaling of gate model quantum computers, right? And the reason why it's an R&D initiative is because there are no gate model quantum computers that can actually solve government problems today. So all the funding around gate model is going to R&D. Okay. Now, we, with our annealing quantum computers, are able to solve important, hard government problems today. For example, we did some work with Annealing and Davidson, both companies you mentioned a minute ago, on missile defense, where we looked at a 500 incoming missile simulation. And what we needed to do was take out those missiles with countermeasures. And leveraging our quantum computer, what Annealing found was that they could compute the solution 10 times faster. And obviously, when you've got incoming missiles, computing the solution fast matters. And 10% greater takeout rate. On a 500 incoming missile problem, they could take out 50 more missiles than with the solution they were computing purely classically. So this is an example of our quantum computer addressing a real government Department of War problem today and delivering strong results. Well, Annealing participated in our customer conference at the end of January. It's called Qubits. They were on stage with me during my keynote, and Annealing's president and chief business officer basically said, we were surprised at how capable and mature the D-Wave annealing quantum computer is. I will tell you that in the roughly month and a half since that conference, we have had many inbound requests from the US government to learn more about our annealing quantum computers, because there's now this growing realization that annealing is real today. It's commercial today. It can solve important, hard problems today and deliver value today. So the government's, I believe, view of quantum computing is changing as we speak to be more broad-based, looking at leveraging annealing quantum computing today to solve important problems while investing in the R&D for gate model systems to solve problems in the future that gate model systems are more well-suited to solving.
Yeah. Just so jumping to a different application, at the risk of getting in over my head, but, it seems like quantum annealing also might be a good match for some problems in chemistry where you're looking for a low energy state. And I know you have done some work in this area, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of the state of the art when it comes to, blue sky discovery of molecules to bind to a known target / is narrowing a search, or where you think the roles of the different technologies could play.
So, as I said right up front, annealing quantum computers can't do quantum chemistry. In other words, we cannot compute a broad array of properties of different molecular structures, okay? We just don't have the ability to perform those computations. And the reason is our qubits in the annealing quantum computer are a bit simpler. They're only spin up or spin down. They're not three-dimensional qubits like gate model qubits, okay? And that provides some restrictions on the kinds of materials and molecular structure work that we can do with the annealing quantum computer. So we're excellent at optimization, right? Gate model can't really address those problems, but quantum chemistry is not our thing. Now, that having been said, AI is now emerging as a very interesting approach to molecular discovery. Generative AI for generating new molecular structures. And we are able to provide value in the area of generative AI. And let me give you an example. We've been working with a company called Shionogi in Japan. They used to be a part of Japan Tobacco. They were the pharmaceutical division of Japan Tobacco. And they developed an AI model for generating molecular structures for new human drugs. So a generative AI model. Okay. It's a large language model that they trained classically. They then retrained it using our quantum computer. And what they found was that the molecular structures generated using the model trained with our quantum computer were far more well suited to human drugs, basically closer to the data set than the molecules generated with the classically trained model. So the
basically because you
go ahead.
Sorry, because you could model essentially which molecules were likely to be more drug-like?
Because the model was more accurate.
Okay.
We basically, leveraging our quantum computer, we were able to train a model that was more accurate in the sense that it generated structures that more closely resembled the training data set.
Okay. Okay. So I guess moving on a little bit, and Asit, I don't know if you wanted to ask about this first, maybe some more sort of investor-oriented questions.
Yeah, sure. Would love to jump in. Honestly, I had a quick follow-up, though, before we do that, which is, this piques my interest a bit, as you mentioned, using generative AI, retraining a model then on your system. We haven't given you a chance to brag on the Advantage 2, which I understand is your latest system. But before we do jump into some financial questions, I wonder if you could explain a little bit more how Advantage 2 represents a little bit of a leap in being able to have these hybrid classical quantum workflows, and maybe give us a practical example out in the real world of a business that might be able to use this.
Yeah. So let me start with Advantage 2 itself, not hybrid, just natively Advantage 2. This was the system on which we were able to demonstrate quantum supremacy on a useful real-world problem. We're the only company in the world that's been able to demonstrate that. The Advantage 2 system is the only system that's capable of delivering that type of result. And as I said earlier, that had to do with computing some properties of magnetic materials. Again, this is back to, we can't deal with general chemistry, but we can deal with certain types of materials with our annealing quantum computer. And in this particular case, natively on the annealing quantum computer, no hybrid involved, no classical involved, natively on the annealing quantum computer, we were able to compute properties of magnetic materials that cannot be computed classically, full stop. So this is the most powerful quantum computer in the world. All right. Now, beyond that, we also have our hybrid solvers. Our latest generation hybrid solver is called the Stride solver. And this solver is able to take problems that are larger than what can fit natively on the Advantage 2 quantum computer and break them down, sending hard subproblems off to the Advantage 2 quantum computer, thereby being able to solve very large commercial grade problems better and faster than they can be solved purely classically. And to give you an example of that, we recently completed some work with BASF, one of the largest chemical companies in the world. And this is related to how they fulfill orders. So they have a chemical plant that has many chemical materials, and they have incoming orders, and they basically need to do the mixing to create the chemicals that fulfill the orders, bottle them, and ship them out. And what they found was that by using our hybrid solvers backed with our Advantage2 quantum computer, they were able to compute better solutions to that production process, basically taking it from what was a 10-hour computation down to a 5-second computation. And what's so important about that is that many times they have issues with delivery trucks, for example. And so they need to recompute the schedule at the beginning of the day or in the middle of the day. Well, if it takes 10 hours to compute the production schedule, you can't do that. But with 5 seconds, they can now recompute the schedule and re-optimize whenever they need to. And that's a real world example. Another example is NTT Docomo, the largest cellular operator in Japan. NTT Docomo uses us to optimize cell tower resources, basically the paging messages that flow between the towers and the smartphones to determine which tower is controlling a particular cell phone at any point in time. Leveraging our quantum computer, they're able to support up to 15% more phones per tower and reduce infrastructure costs. So there's a couple of real-world examples, one natively on the quantum computer that can't even be solved classically, the other two using our hybrid solvers, delivering better solutions faster than what they were achieving classically.
So you've you mentioned a number of customers that you've worked with at this point, and I should say, you have, I think, well over 100 customers that you've had in various capacities. Just thinking about the kind of value that you're delivering to them, I'm just wondering, and I should mention, you guys do sort of quantum computing as a service, right? But you also sell systems. And you had a pretty sizable deal earlier this year in the university setting. But going back to the quantum computing as a service, is there anything you can say about the sort of the net retention of those customers? Who's kind of coming back and who's moving from sort of proof of concept to pilot to full production stage?
So first of all, let me say that you're absolutely right. There are two components to our business model, both system sales and quantum compute as a service. If you're a commercial company who just cares about solving your hard problem, quantum compute as a service is the best path for you because you can buy just what you need to solve your problem. If you're a university or a research institution that's trying to solve problems that have never been solved before, do science, maybe research into AI, then you may need to control more of the operating parameters of the quantum computer than is possible through the cloud service. That's when you want to own your own system. And both of those models are important to us. They are very complementary. They're different customer sets, so they don't compete with one another. They're different use cases, so they don't compete with one another. And they're frankly both valuable to us in a different way. Quantum compute as a service allows us to build a base of recurring revenue for more predictable revenue growth over the long term, whereas system sales gives us that quick hit of upfront revenue. It allows us to grow the revenue more rapidly. And the two are very complementary, and we're now leveraging both. And frankly, 2026 is off to a great start for us in the sense that in just the first 2 months, we did over 32 million in bookings. That's more than we did all of last year. And that included both a $20 million system sale and a 2-year, $10 million enterprise cloud service deal. Okay, now,
can you say who that customer is, or?
I cannot. Okay. I'm hoping that at some point in the future, I will be able to tell you who it is. But all I can say is that they're a Fortune 100 customer.
Okay.
So it's a very important deal for us. It was,
Well, that
go ahead.
Well, that does get to, because I mean, this is maybe oversimplifying, but if you kind of look at, sort of a rough number of customers and revenue and divide it out, it seems like a lot of the pilot projects are, valued in the sort of the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars kind of range. Like how, if investors are looking at that and saying like, well, as these pilot customers become production customers, like what kind of scale can we think of in revenue? I mean, that's maybe some hint.
Yeah. So first of all, I think 2025 into 2026 is the watershed moment for us. It is the point at which we are seeing that transition from early experimentation, proof of technology, proof of concept into production deployment. This $10 million 2-year deal, it started as a proof of concept for a first application. It was a very important application for this customer. And frankly, we knocked the cover off the ball. The results were spectacular. They saw massive ROI in it. This application will be deployed within the next 30 days into production. But they came back to us and said, look, we've got a lot more applications that we now want to work on with you. We want an all-you-can-eat license. And that's why we put the 2-year, $10 million license in place to work with them across a broad array of different applications. We've got another customer in the airline industry. We've got a customer in the aerospace industry. We've got a large healthcare customer. We're working with all of these now through transitions like this. So we are very much, I believe, at a watershed moment right now for moving from smaller research and proof of concept into more large production applications. So I think ultimately this will be a very significant business for us, quantum computing as a service.
So Dr. Baratz, if we just extrapolate out of this watershed moment, vision out 5 to 10 years in the future, I'll give you what's either the easiest question of the day or the hardest question of the day. When you hit that sort of baseline of net income profitability consistent on a GAAP basis in the future, whenever that time arrives, what type of maybe net profit margins should investors expect that this company could generate? Or if you want to answer that maybe more in operating margin terms, that's fine as well. But just give us a sense of what this company might be able to generate in terms of profits once you get beyond sort of the cash burn into the post break-even period.
So the first thing I'll say is it's not going to take us 10 years to get to profitability. We have said we think we'll be the first quantum computing company to become profitable, and we will have done it on far less investment than any of the other quantum computing companies. But nonetheless, to your point, so our margins today are quite good, in the 80 to 85% range. So we have very strong margins. Now, as we bring our gate model quantum computers to market, the costs of those are a bit higher than the cost of our annealing quantum computers. So the margins will likely come down some, at least initially. But, I still think we have the ability to target margins that are, well north of 60%, probably north of 70%. And right now we're north of 80%. So, since it's probably, 5 years before we see commercial gate model systems anyway, including ours. And so we'll be building the business for that period of time on our annealing systems. You can expect very strong margins, right, through to profitability. Because, I think we could become profitable on our annealing systems. I don't know that we need the gate model systems to achieve profitability. But once those gate model systems become truly commercially viable, the margins will come down a little bit because they are a bit more expensive.
So talking about the path to profitability, certainly you guys have a pretty comfortable cash cushion right now, over $880 million, at least at the end of 2025, I think, which is pretty significant. I'm just wondering, you have done and it's not just you guys. A lot of QC companies have done these sort of at the market financings opportunistically as times have come along. IonQ terminated that program last year, basically saying they didn't like the overhang of having that at the market financing mechanism in place, and then they subsequently did a big equity offering. I'm wondering if you guys think that you're looking at anything different in your financing strategy going forward while you are still in the cash burn stage.
Yeah. So first of all, we have said we have a fully funded plan. So, current course and speed, we don't need to raise more cash to get to profitability. That having been said, that would not account for any other large acquisitions, for example. So if we wanted to do any other significant acquisitions, we probably would want to or need to bring some additional capital into the company. Given the market right now, I don't think this would be the time to do that. But at some point in the future, when the war is over, interest rates are coming down, the market is stronger again, we could well go out and look to raise additional capital. Exactly what mechanisms we use would depend on what the markets look like at that point in time. I mean, there are many different mechanisms that we could potentially use, and we'll just have to see what the markets look like at the point in time at which we think it makes sense to do that.
Great.
Dr. Baratz, we've got time for one last question. And of course, this being the Motley Fool, we wanted to talk about culture. I was wondering if you could describe the culture at D-Wave for us, and also tell us what you're most proud of that you've instituted since you took over the CEO helm, I think, about 6 years ago.
Yeah. So we have an amazing team-oriented culture. Every person in the company is not only focused on delivering what they've committed to deliver, but on helping anybody else in the company that needs or could benefit from their help. And as a result, we are phenomenal at problem solving. I mean, quantum computing is not for the faint of heart. It is challenging. We run into impossibly hard problems day after day after day, but this team is always able to come together, put together their collective wisdom and intelligence and solve these problems. And they just knock them down one after the next. I don't worry about whether we're going to be able to solve a problem or not. I know the team can do it. And it's because of that team culture. Now, when I joined the company, we were not very good at getting the balance right between building systems and bringing systems to market, right? In that the focus was almost exclusively on building systems. And as a result, as engineers tend to do, it was never good enough. So let me make it better and better and better. And it's not yet ready for the market. It's not yet ready for the market.
Karl, I think we suffer from a little bit of that ourselves, you and me.
We all do.
That could be.
But one of the things that I did when I joined the company is that I was able to help everybody in the company understand that, it's exciting and rewarding to have people using what you've created and to get value from what you've created. And as a result, we now have an excellent balance between, building the next great thing and getting products into the market to help our customers derive value from that. And then there's a third component, and it's science. So there's building the systems, there's commercializing the systems, but there's also doing science on the systems. We do a lot of science on our systems. The quantum supremacy work that we did, materials, computing properties of materials, material simulation, that was great science work, right? Published in Science. So we now have a really good balance between building products, we're developing technology and building products, getting them into the market and doing amazing science on those systems. And, it's that kind of balance and culture that I'm really proud of.
Well, Dr. Alan Baratz, this has been such an informative conversation today. Really appreciate you taking the time to explain a lot about D-Wave to us and to take every question that Karl and myself could throw at you. And I know our members appreciate it as well.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the time.